Well, you've done it. You got the kids back to school. You sorted the uniforms and named enough things for a small army. No rest for the wicked, though. It's a new year and a new routine of juggling it all.
Well, maybe we can help. You can now get your Dunnes Stores shop delivered same day by those lovely people at Buy Me. Just order your same-day delivery straight from the Dunnes Stores app. What's more, delivery on your first 4 orders is free.
Don't forget it's swimming lessons tomorrow.
Minimum spend €30. Selected delivery areas only, subject to availability.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back, ALBC fans.
All right. We're going to just call it right now. We're going to get it out in the open. We know we're going to take some shit for this interview. Anytime we remotely mention nutrition or supplements or anything fitness related in conversations on this show, we hear about it. Even if it's just an innocent name drop about a protein shake that we love, it trips some kind of alarm and we get angry notes.
We're not scared of your angry notes, are we, Sarah?
No, because
of course
we're
not.
so self-assured and
right.
solid in ourselves as people.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the Eckhart Tolle episode, right? People felt like we were somehow being cult apologists by having Eckhart on the show. Remember
Right.
that?
Like they thought that, like, how is it possible that we are shining light on culty vibes in the new age spirituality space and then be cordial with and chummy with somebody like Eckhart? That was the grievance?
Yeah, something like that.
I would encourage all of our listeners to go back and listen to that episode as well, because I still stand that it was one of my favorite. Maybe I was a little bit fawny, a little bit like,
No, I thought it was great. It was just, there was no place to ask a question. Anyway.
It was
Wade's not like that.
Wade is not like that. We promise.
So,
he does have some really great sound bites, but we haven't even said what we're talking about.
We are entering the food industry in a lot of ways, right? So like topics like nutrition, wellness, and diet, they're all hot buttons right now, especially if you go through your Instagram feed. Everyone's trying to sell you something.
Yes, and there's so many snake oil salesmen out there. There's so many scams. We see you, Juice Plus, so many factions, and it gets divisive real quickly. In fact, people can get a little culty about whatever they believe in, as we know from this podcast, especially if it's about a diet. In fact,
Vegan, carnivore.
I have been known to be quite righteous about various new ways of living in the past, and including my diet. I can own that. Friends, this does not give you license to text me about how annoying I've been in the past. But
No, you're fine.
Thank you.
All right. So today's guest, Wade T. Lightheart, knows all about the wars around this stuff because he's the co-founder of BiOptimizers, one of the hottest supplement brands on the market. Full disclosure, BiOptimizers has also sponsored this show in the past.
Fuller disclosure, BiOptimizers has also sponsored some controversial influencers that have been frequent targets of other cult awareness shows and watchdogs.
And fullest disclosure, Wade is a dear friend of ours.
So tell us about Wade, babe.
So Wade T. Lightheart is a certified sports nutritionist advisor and president director of education and co-founder of BiOptimizers. As a plant-based and drug-free athlete for more than 2 decades, Wade is a 3-time national natural bodybuilding champion who competed in both the IFBB Mr. Universe and the INBA Natural Olympia by the age of 31. At the age of 50, Wade came out of retirement to win the Open Men's and Grand Masters categories at the INBA Ironman International, then competed at the PNBA Natural Olympia. 6 months later, Wade successfully ran his first marathon in 4 hours, and I also note that he's a vegan bodybuilder.
So we figured that this chat with Wade would be a great opportunity to ask some of the questions we have personally and the questions that we get from time to time from our listeners. Like, how do you know if you're buying into something healthy or drinking snake oil? And is it just us? Or have the health and wellness trends become even more culty than ever? And most importantly, with so many factions and influences and so much noise, especially on the Instagram feed, meat eaters versus carnivores and keto versus paleo, how do you figure out what's right for you if you just want to make some positive lifestyle changes?
Wade's book, which he co-authored with his BiOptimizers co-founder Matt Gallant, has the culty title, The Ultimate Nutrition Bible. So we didn't want to miss a chance to ask Wade for his take on diet and wellness wars, and it's a wealth of knowledge. Every diet you can imagine has been explored on this.
So without further ado, here's our interview with our dear and old friend, well, youthful, longtime friend, Wade T. Lightheart.
I was going to introduce him and ask him, you leave one cult. There's a lot of cults out there. You're currently in the cult of marriage and about to be in the cult of fatherhood.
Yeah.
Which I'm in. And it's a lovely cult.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You can question it here and there. How is it? How is married life? Congratulations.
Thank you. What's interesting, I just went through the ceremony a couple of weeks ago, and we were discussing privately on a text message. It's like there's a change in the algorithm of your decision-making process.
Yes.
And there's an adaptive response. And, that's the same as whether you're doing, you're trying to get in shape or you're trying to do some medical protocol or you're at a new career. There are certain decision parameters that we make. It's a lens we put on. And part of that is cultural and the cultural expectations. Mm-hmm. So in my case, Judeo-Christian West values and the institution of marriage and what that entails. And then you've got your family lens and stuff. And so now, as a 52-year-old guy, which I never had to deal with that one before, it was kind of like pushed out there, surfacing, kind of like you hear about a cult, but you don't actually interact it. And then you go and you're like, oh, wow, like let's do this and let's do that. And so now I'm in the adaptive phase, I would say, to be frank.
Yeah, you're installing the new filter decisions have to go through.
Correct.
Yes. And that filter pushes back.
It pushes back against the old programming, whatever that was, exactly. Or the old system, because that algorithm doesn't work anymore. Yeah. It goes, and you get it when your wife looks at you and goes, no, that's not going to work. And you're like,
Nippy knows that look.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Listen, Wade, our listeners will have heard your impressive bio by the time they get to this part of the conversation and your resume and all the things you've done. And we could have interviewed sort of so many people who are speaking out about diets and culty connections, but tell our audience why you are on our podcast. How did we get to here? If you want to weave a little tapestry, what's happening here?
Well, I was thinking about this the other day because I was like, how did this all start? And then I realized it's just cool connection with Katrine.
Yes.
Katrine and I were living together in Vancouver. You were going to, I think, her chocolate class or something.
Yep.
And then whole genesis of what you guys were starting happened. And I think one of the first meetings was at our recreation.
Yeah, in the rec room.
You literally borrowed our facility at the rec room.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to go because of the connection to What the Bleep Do We Know.
Right.
What the Bleep Do We Know. And I thought, oh, that guy's really cool. I really like that movie. And then just before the event happened, something came up in my mind, said, no, I'm not going. I don't know what it was.
Interesting.
It is. And then later on, I think a little bit later, maybe 8 months when you had ESP going and, I went down to that and I saw all and I want to make this really important to people so they understand. There was a lot of positive, value-added components. I knew you guys. I saw how integrous and motivated you were to help people and to support people in transformation. There was a wonderful community. So there was all of these good things that were around that I think gets lost in all the chaos and what happened was underneath. And I think that's part of the attractive process. What attracts people to any culture, there is an aspirational aspect that's not being dealt with in your prior life. And you see people out there living and doing and being a certain way, and you guys are examples of that. And the people around you were examples of like, hey, they're talking some different language. They're talking some different things. It seems to be working. What I'm currently doing isn't giving me the results. So I want to integrate whatever that algorithm is into my own life, my own operational system, my own structure in order to achieve or have or be what those individuals represent. And so that's what happens. And so I was mesmerized by all of it. And then years later, I think if I go back in time, just before the big blow up happened, Anthony invited me to another segment of this, which is a really cool group for men. And I think there's a really devoid space now for men to be around men and to hold each other accountable in these things. And he put this forth, and I remember seeing a little video, like I was really excited about, I'm doing this stuff. I liked the whole process and everything. And then I saw a video with Keith on dealing with a particular person. And because I wasn't totally immersed in the whole culture, I was able to look at it at a lens that other people weren't. And I saw him installing beliefs into people in a question and answer thing. In other words, he wasn't listening. He would listen a little bit, interject and override a program. And I saw how sophisticated it was. And, this is what happens inside of what I call a thing called guru-itis. So what constitutes the aspect of a cult? And I've had a lot of experience with it because I had another friend, a client of mine, who was part of the whole Hubbard program with Scientology stuff. And he was with Hubbard before Hubbard kind of, as he said, went dark. And what you have is you have a person who is maybe producing a great result, who has created an architecture. They probably have some values. They've learned a lot of information. They've got something that works for people. And then they build up the trust and value in integration. So on the front side of everything, you're going to see a set of values or principles or actions that actually work and are effective.
Yep.
And that's what attracts you in. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like all humans, we have flaws. And when you're dealing with a percentage of society, whether that's, like sociopaths and psychopaths, which is, somewhere between 1% and 3% of society, depending on, and then there's degrees of that.
Right.
And if you add high IQ with that, then you're dealing with a level of sophistication that, frankly, most people are not capable of discerning until it's too late.
Right.
And that's how so many people get caught up in all of the good aspects, and they are good, and that's legitimate. And all of the dark cults wrap themselves in a set of ideals and plans and everything that do actually work until you get inside it. And then that very slippery slope where you get into that point where you're going, I don't know about this, but everything else has worked and I got to go along with it. And then there's the reinforcement socially. And then there's a competition is who is the greatest devotee of the new person. And then what happens is the highest achievers are the most likely people to fall because they're so integrated and they're so good at doing that, then they become the orchestrations that the cult leader hides behind.
Right.
And I see this in the diet industry. It's no different. And I can get into that too, but that's my long. And I remember when everything blew up for you guys, and I remember it was what happens when you're inside of that and you recognize the fallen guru, the fallen icon of your industry. There is a level of devastation, and it's the dark night of the soul. And then you start saying, "Well, am I corrupt? Have I done things wrong?" And I remember when you guys were going through that deep emotional state, and I was like, "No, I know you guys. I'm not part of that group. I know how you operate. I know what your values are. I know the people around you and what they're doing. No, I think you just found out this guy's a cult leader. And then, and that's devastating. And this is going to be problematic. And I don't know what's going to look, but I said, your life is going to suck for the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know how long, but if you stay with the truth long enough, it'll work out. And then I remember when the final judgment came through after all of that. And, Anthony and I have a lot of conversations about, legal and politics and ideologies. And I remember him saying, you know what? I got a little bit more faith in the justice system that eventually it served. It actually worked in the final end. But it was a hell of a journey that you guys had to go through to get there. So kudos to you. You stuck with it. And we're all a better place because of it. Now you're doing great work of helping other people. So that's a beautiful thing.
Also, one of the things, and
Thanks,
thank you
Wade.
for your friendship during all that. I know I've told you that personally, but you were one of the guys who showed up and reassured me, and because your confidence gets shot after something like that, your internal world of your decision making is. And those conversations we had in our patio were great for me. And to have a solid guy have my back at that time was great. You said something interesting, and I want to share this with our audience. One of the texts I got from someone, a good friend of mine I went to high school with, she texted me after seeing all this, and she said, it's a shame that's how that guy used his intelligence.
Yeah.
And to your point, like that you can get 1% to 3% of people, the number there, but one of them's going to be just, I don't want to do good with this. And they're going to want to do some bad with it. And to your point, people don't see that they're doing bad until it's too late. So well put.
Well put. And I really appreciate your support during those times. We figured out who our friends were when shit hit the fan, and you've always been there for us ever since the raw chocolate days at the beginning and right to the end.
The New York City event.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing that was so odd, because I think, was that the first time we met?
That's the first time I met you, and I saw you save the event, and I was like, that guy's a good dude.
He didn't have
to do that.
Nippy to a health and wellness, it feels like a mini TED type of speaking event. And I knew you, Wade, and I was probably trying to still recruit you, but I thought, I'll introduce him to Nippy and then they'll become friends. I mean, I was always subtly trying to do that, but I also wanted to introduce you. And then of course you both developed a friendship surpassed ours, which I still approve of, because, here we are.
Do I get a stamp? Do I get a stamp?
You do. You get or a stripe or a sash or a star.
You're the first member.
You're the first member of our new cult. But actually, one of the things, since I've known you this whole time, one of my experiences of you is somebody who really gives everything your all, and you try new things, and you're totally open, which is why I actually do remember being surprised that you never tried ESP, and I'm glad you didn't. But at the time, I remember thinking, he tries this, he tries that. You're such a learner and an avid, mini scientist is how I experience you, a spiritual and nutrition scientist.
Pursuit of excellence.
Pursuit of excellence, yeah. But amidst all that, you have managed to not get caught up in anything particularly culty. You take the tools and you put them in your life, but you don't make the tools your life. How have you managed to navigate this culty world, which we're going to get into, do you think?
Well, a couple of things. And I would say I read a book called Power versus Force. It was written by Dr. David Hawkins. And actually,
you gave me that book.
Got to meet Dr. David Hawkins. And it's a beautiful map of consciousness. And of course, being a psychiatrist, he had to deal with all sorts. If you get into some of his later books beyond Power versus Force, particularly one called Truth and Falsehood. And one of the things he identifies in this is narcissistic, messianic megalomania. And he was brought into, as a psychiatrist, to evaluate psychopaths, sociopaths, mentally ill. He was a consultant for a lot of spiritual organizations to see if someone was actually enlightened or catatonic. And some of the elements of really high levels of schizophrenia also are similar to states of enlightenment. And you need someone that is very skilled and competent. And he had both sides of the equation. And so having read through that literature and studied it extensively, and the first time I read Truth and Falsehood, the book that he wrote, it was so disruptive for my belief system, I had to read it again, because I'm like, how could that not be? And then it took me probably 3 or 4 years to actually use that as a filter to determine, who am I dealing with here? And what are the traps of fame, adulation, money, drugs, whatever. There's booby traps in the map of if you go up the levels of consciousness. And what happens is as you become that guru type figure, these are some of the subtle traps that seem to appear for everyone, whether they're head of a spiritual organization, whether a leader of an MLM company, or a CEO of a large executive function, a social media foundation, a government official. And there are people in the world, many of them working for spy agencies, who are absolutely there to build confidence and to expose you, to compromise you, then to coerce you, and then to corrupt you. And so we see so many people that go into positions of power, and then we find out later that somehow they got lost, somehow they got corrupted, somehow they became evil. And so you have to have a little bit of humility. And the humility is like, well, what characteristics do I possess that could also be exposed in that situation? If I can see my own, then I have enough empathy to say, well, it's quite possible that that person has fallen for that. I don't know. So you got to always go back to humility and recognize, well, I have some of these characteristics myself. What I'm seeing in the world is some aspect of myself. We all have the potential for excellence, and we all have the potential for malevolence inside of us. It comes with the human condition. And under the right circumstances, as Carl Jung pointed out, you have to explore your shadow side. That, yeah, you, myself, any one of us could rationalize the most heinous things. And most people don't want to look at that in themselves. And if you can't look at it in yourself, you will not be able to see that in someone else.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. It's funny you bring that up because we've talked about that book before, and then we got written to by a couple people, which happens every episode. But this particular one was saying that that book was used as the sort of Bible in that particular cult, Power versus Force.
Yeah.
And specifically that truth that I do believe is a truism that you just said can also be used to abuse somebody. If they say like, oh, hey, there's something wrong here, they will say, well, that's your shadow side.
Correct.
Like it can be used to gaslight. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a great aspect. I remember that so one of my other influential figures in my life is a guy by Paramahansa Yogananda. Some would argue he runs a cult called the Selfrealization Fellowship. And if you look at his
he actually calls it that?
Well, I think some people have called it a cult or whatever.
Okay.
I would say that the New England Patriots is a cult, and social media is like culture is inside a cult. So
yes.
What constitutes that depends I think when things start turning dark and coercive to people, that's the sign that you're probably
a bad kind
in
of
a
cult.
problematic aspect. Everything should always be an option and a choice and a selection.
Yeah.
And you should never go against something that feels uncomfortable inside yourself. Either it's uncomfortable because you're not ready, or it's uncomfortable because somewhere deep within the moral, ethical code of yourself, it's not right. Mm-hmm. Anyways, there was a conversation with him and his spiritual teacher. And for those who don't know about Yogananda, he didn't want to come to the West. He didn't want to start an organization. He wanted to go to the Himalayas and meditate in a cave and just be in bliss all of the time. And then his teacher said, well, how about starting an organization to help people? And he goes, no, I don't want to run an organization. Whatever the leader does, you'll eventually be criticized. You'll be attacked vehemently. Yeah. And there'll be all sorts of branches that come out of it that will be distorting of your truth. And he's like, yeah, but do you want the whole divine channel for yourself? You want everything you learned? Wasn't a bunch of people that taught you, and you're just going to say, oh, that's it, I'm not contributing anymore? So it's a catch-22.
Right.
Now,
right.
Of course, if you look at the history of Yogananda, and there's a great movie called Awake, this guy was attacked vehemently. He had his own people. He went through a very similar process. And you look at that and you go, well, and you guys have experienced that as leaders of an organization, advocates of personal development and change, and somehow you get branded as evil or corrupt or something wrong. And I saw none of that in my experience with you guys. But because of this one distortion, it's like one drop of poison pollutes the whole pond.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. So in any case, we always have to take everything with a grain of salt. We always have to be discerning. And you always have to keep people around you that will call you out when they're feeling distorted. And we have to have enough humility to actually hear them out and consider other points of view. And that becomes more and more difficult the more entrenched that you become. And so when I was really deeply immersed with Yogananda's teachings, I went to Power versus Force. Like I went to that, and when he started explaining some of the cult dynamics that start to occur, because he studied all these things, he went to Sedona where there's been a ton of cults come through here. He studied what are the characteristics that create that, what are the avenues, and how to protect yourself inside of the cultification, the deification of a personality, and all of the, do-gooderisms within that, and the, the levels of, well, I'm the best, devotee of all, and therefore that gives me authority to condemn everyone else. Mm-hmm. Because of the nature of our ego and our desire to be the best that we can be. So both of those things were very helpful. And now I think I'm much better equipped to take what I need, extract the other stuff, right, and move through life. And I've been very blessed because of it.
Well,
That's
one of
great.
the things I think that's made you less susceptible to those things is you've had a pretty clear vision for what you want to do in your life and your goals. So, my opinion of you is that you've been able to do that because you are focused on this. And certain people will come into organization and go, love this, but I have a business to run. Mm-hmm. I'm doing this. It was a time you were committed to something else. This was, if anything, or the things that you've been in were more supplemental.
Yeah, you weren't going to give out your vision of being this top-level athlete and bodybuilding next to Arnold to go, well, I guess you've done both. Do these tools help me do that?
Well, let's take a look at the sport of bodybuilding, which is a great example. So when I'm 15 years old, I'm living a horrible life in rural New Brunswick, and here's this guy on television, bigger than life. He's married to the Kennedys. He's selling great, robust movies of hyper-masculinity. He's got all these muscles. I don't think people who haven't lived through Arnold in his heyday to see the attractive aspect of masculinity that he embraced. I don't care about anything. I am going to eat my muscles. I am going to have all the ladies. I am going to win in bodybuilding, and I'm going to win in the movies, and I'm going to win in politics. I'm unstoppable. I'm this Nietzsche made a machine. This is great, right?
I tried to not like him. I literally tried to not like him. And I'm like, God damn, like he's...
super magnanimous personality, larger than life, big on the big screen. And I looked at this guy's values. And in his book, Education of a Bodybuilder, he says, hard work, self-discipline, and a positive attitude. Okay. No one's talking those principles around here. Everybody works hard, but no one knows about self-discipline and positive attitude. I embrace that. Long story short, I have no characteristics for body. So I go into the bodybuilding world, which is a cult. Okay? And I get to the national championships in 1998, my first national championships. And I'm backstage. It looks like a MASH unit. Guys are past, like people are getting transfusion. Like it's a mess. And I didn't win that contest. I came 6th. And then, I met with my coach 6 weeks later. And he's like, okay, if you want to make the next step in your journey, these are the drugs you're going to have to use. We're going to, and at this time I'm 230 pounds with veins in my abs. I'm not competitive. I got to go to like 260, 270. I'm like suffering.
Right.
I look like a recycled superhero, and I'm like, and I see Ronnie Coleman up there and I'm going, there's no amount of drugs that I could do to become Ronnie Coleman. It doesn't matter. He's a different human being. Just like I'm not going to star in the NBA as a center. I'm not going to be Ronnie Coleman. So it broke the mysticism around that aspect. And what happened afterwards is, I retired from the sport. I went through a whole series of partying and doing a wild life. And later, drug tested competitions came back. And I said, well, I love the sport. I love the aspects of training. I love the discipline. I love the dietary stuff. I don't care. If I can't be Mr. Olympia, that's fine. I'm going to go do this. And at that time I was, I was experimenting with vegetarianism and Eastern philosophy. And I was like, I'm going to be a drug-free vegetarian bodybuilder. And I think I can get to the Mr. Universe that way because they have this new pathway for drug-tested athletes. Let's try it. And I did that. Everyone said it wasn't possible. No one was a vegan bodybuilder. And so I went back into the cult without doing some of the things that didn't resonate with me. And 2 years later, I was standing on stage at the Mr. Universe contest. And then from that launched my whole career. Matt and I started our business, and then that led to BiOptimizers, and then that led to essentially what I wanted to do as a 15-year-old, because when I was 15, I said, I'm going to live in Venice Beach, California, like Arnold. I'm going to train at Gold's Gym next to him. I am going to have a supplement company that distributes products around the world after I do the Mr. Universe contest. And all those things happened. It just took me 33 years to get there.
This podcast certainly would not be happening without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, ad-free and exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with fan favorites from our past episodes, Q&As, and all sorts of goodies. It's fun over there, people.
Hey parents, it's time to gear up for the school year at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. We've got all the essentials from first day fits to backpacks, jackets, sneakers, and more. And all for an additional 25% off the outlet prices at participating stores. But wait, there's more. Spend $300 or more in the same day purchases and score a free Adidas backpack. Send your kids back to school in style with top name brands at unbeatable outlet prices. Make this school year the best one yet at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. Visit outlets at traversemountain.com for all the sales. Outlets at Traverse Mountain. I-15 exit 284, Lehigh.
You know what's not refreshing? When your team concedes a last-minute equalizer. Or feeling pressured into joining in the Mexican wave. Or when you spot your best friend at the match even though he said he was busy. Kevin. But a cold pint of Heineken, brewed with just 3 natural ingredients. That's refreshing. Get the facts. Be drink aware. Visit drinkaware.ie.
You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to a little bit culty, shall we? And here you are. And I remember when we met
Perfect segue.
last summer and you told us about your new book, which we are holding in our hands for those who are watching on YouTube, which is so beautiful, by the way. And in this incredible box that comes with a fork and knife and a spoon, which...
We got the deluxe edition.
The deluxe. Thank you for that, for signing it. The reason we were like, oh, well, you got to come on the pod and talk about this is not just so we could catch up, which is also fun, but because we were talking about the divisiveness within the different diet cultures, keto and vegan and macro counting and all the different things.
Fasting.
Lots. Yeah. And Nippy and I definitely have danced around pretty much all of these things at different stages. But can you talk to us about how you've perceived the current cultural conversation around nutrition and lifestyle and the divisiveness and in relation to this podcast and what you've seen? Because, I mean, we could geek out on all the other health stuff for hours, but that unfortunately is not our listenership.
Correct. And I feel like I'm lucky in the aspect that I've got exposed to different things at different times that allowed me to come to fruition. So nobody was a vegan or a vegetarian or a plant-based guy where I grew up. And I remember actually thinking that if I became a vegan, I would dry up and blow away. I used to make jokes. I used to make fun of vegans. And, so part of my penance, I guess, is to become one later on. But anyways, so because that was part of the culture I grew up in, hunting, fishing, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was great. There was nothing wrong with that. And I was able to achieve a high level of fitness. What I didn't share with you is after I did the contest in 2003, the Mr. Universe, I was trying to do a vegan version of a bodybuilding diet and had some limitations. And so what happened is after that contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water. Don't try that at home in 11 weeks. Wow. Because I just destroyed my system. And I met a guy by the name of Dr. Michael O'Brien. He was the most vibrant senior citizen I ever met. He was in his 70s. The guy was just like everything you'd want to be as a 70. He was like cocoon guy or something. This guy was amazing. And I met him and he was talking about raw food and enzymes and probiotics and, special aminos and how your gut digestion was so important. And then I went to him, I said, well, look, I'm at the pinnacle of, performance-based fitness and health. Like here I'm at the Mr. Universe contest and now I look like Mr. Marshmallow. What happened? He's like, oh, wait, you didn't know how to build the body. You learned to build the body from the outside in, but not the inside out. So then he started teaching me about enzymes and probiotics and these things that no one else was talking about at that time. You have to realize that this was like wildly outside of the box of nutrition. And I had mastered nutrition from a sports side, but not from a health side. I didn't know the difference. You think if a person looks good, they're healthy. That's not necessarily the case. They might be fit, right, but they may have compromised their health to give an external look. And that's proliferated even more and more today. Well, anyways, he says you got to go on a raw food diet. You got to do these enzymes and stuff for 90 days. I did it all. I did it for 6 months. I felt amazing. I got my body back, got my health back. And so I got all of the benefits that they were promoting, and I went down that road. My business partner, then I started a business with Matt at the same time. Now, Matt embraced that, but then his whole training was ketogenic. So he said, yeah, certain things, but I really prefer ketogenic. So he goes back to ketogenic. We start a company together. So I'm this raw foodist as a bodybuilder. He's a ketogenic guy. We're at the far end of the spectrum. In fact, he was experimenting with carnivorism. I'm at raw food. So if you look at the dietary rainbow or the the variants, we're literally at polar opposites, and we're starting a company together. And
Republican and Democrats.
Right. And we argued and we fought and we got research and we even put podcasts together where we would be challenging each other and all this sort of stuff. We were actually recording
That's
CDs
awesome.
at the time because podcasts didn't exist. And what happened is, as we went back and forth, I started to realize, well, there's certain elements of what he's saying is actually true. And then he started to realize, well, there's certain elements that Wade says is true. And then we would test them and we would get the benefits. And then we realized, oh, geez. Now, keep in mind, I had gone through the whole raw food cult, which was another cultification. If you're not raw, I remember going, this is the turning point, and I talk about it in the book. I remember going to a raw food festival, and this kind of waif-like character comes up with like these glazed eyes like this. And he's like, what percentage of raw are you? And I knew if I didn't say I'm 100%, raw food to the, I'm done, right? I am going to be cast into the everlasting fire of, the throne of the devil, which is the kitchen, which is what somebody used to say, the oven. And at that moment, I was like, oh, this is a cult. Mm-hmm. Because I'm determined by my level of integration with this values. And so those things set me up. And then I started looking at the rise and fall of different dietary fads. If you've been in this industry as long as I have, you'll see, oh yeah, we're about due for the plant-based program. Yep, next is going to be the carnivore program. Then, we're going to go to ketos. And you see carbs are bad, fats are bad, protein's bad, fiber's bad, fiber's good, fats are good, protein's good. And what happens, and we discuss this in the book, if you understand science, there's a bell curve of distribution. Mm-hmm. And the bell curve of distribution means this. Most people fall within the 80 percentile range, the first two standard deviations. But the extraordinary people are outside of the bell curve. So let's call it the top 2%. Okay, so that top 2%, when they do, quote unquote, the keto diet after they become a vegetarian, they're like, oh, I've tried vegetarianism for this many years. I got sick. I got fat. I felt terrible. I couldn't go. I switched to keto and wow, I became this and I became smarter and I became leaner and I became a sex powerhouse. And it's like, wow. And I actually believe what they say is true.
Yeah.
Conversely, so then the top part of those people now become the testimonials that are brought forth in the podcast. So now you have confirmation bias of, oh yeah, this is working. I felt this, I do this. Because they don't put the negative ones up there. They put the positive ones because they got to sell you something. They got to sell you the idea. They got to sell you the values. They got to sell you the principles. They got to sell you the supplements, right? Now, the bottom 2% that make that switch, they don't metabolize fats well. They can't handle, proteins well. They become the haters. They become the person that said, oh, I took that. I gained 30 pounds. I lost my sex drive. My brain didn't work. But then I found paleo. Right? and here we go. Right. So what happens, because we celebrate excellence in our culture, because it's a marker of what we aspire to do. So if you're aspirational, those people who embody excellence, like the Ronnie Colemans of bodybuilding, like the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the movie business, like the advocates of the various diet aspects, are legitimate, have felt that, and as you try to embrace it, some of it works to some varying degree and some of it doesn't. And after watching this for years and years and years, I realized, and Matt and I both came to the conclusion because of our different dietary strategies, there's actually a lot of different ways to be healthy. And nowadays we have the technology to discern exactly what's right for you. And you don't have to be part of a cult in order to be successful. You can just take what works and throw away what doesn't and become personalized nutrition. And we created a pyramid of nutritional decisions in the book. And at the bottom of the pyramid, might be the biggest value in the book in a lot of ways. We talk about below, it's a pyramid, and at the bottom is spiritual and cultural commitments. The second level is an emotional and psychological needs. The third level is goals. Then we get into calories and macros. Then we get into nutrigenomics. Then we get into gut biome. Then we get into supplements, food altars, and then we get into lifestyle, which is the final key to sustainability. Can you do this as a way of life forever? And do you have enough flexibility to integrate something else when your physiology changes? Because we're all subjected to the laws of entropy, and your body doesn't work the same as we get older. We all experience in that. And then you might have to integrate. And there's always limits within every diet, and there's advantages in every diet. You need to be flexible enough to be able to move through the different times, seasons, and places. And now we have the capability to do it, but you have to get out. But at the bottom, those emotional, spiritual, psychological, and cultural needs actually are the base point from which we filter the world. And much of that we don't know. So if I'm born, let's say in Palestine, or I'm born in Israel, which is literally next door to each other, I may have a completely different belief system because of where I was born. I was born in Canada. I have Canadian cultural values. If I'm here at Katrina's house, she was born in Russia, inside of communist Russia. There are aspects of the psyche that are built into that framework that you can't even begin to take them apart unless you've studied that, and that makes you more susceptible or less susceptible to certain cultural dynamics.
This is fascinating. We have a whole list of questions that you're like answering so many of them as you just speak, which is what Nippy said. We're just like, let's just let Wade do his thing.
Well, I also think to that, I think we should get into, use us as an example. Like Wade knows our eating habits, right? And how do we protect ourselves from being susceptible to, say, the cult of the algorithm that's trying to sell you something? This is more for our audience too, because I'm sure people don't even know the different beliefs that they have around food and might not be interested. So it's going to be case by case. But I find that you and I feel like we do our homework on certain things.
But we're also both totally guilty. I've for sure been super guilty, being self-righteous about even post-cult.
Your bulletproof thing. Yeah, like that's a perfect example.
Even since leaving Nexium, I got onto bulletproof situation to help me lose the baby weight, and it worked great. And then I found myself being kind of righteous about it.
Yeah.
And really tried hard to be like, well, this worked for me. It may not work for you, which is, I think, such a key.
But then you pivoted.
Just recently, I got off coffee altogether because I'm going to perimenopause and my hormones are changing, and it was making me really anxious, and I couldn't drink it anymore, at all in any form. So why am I saying that? I'm saying it because
it's an example of pivoting, and I think
pivoting is, you can't do that in a cult. In a cult, you're stuck to this belief system, and I was so happy to see you even mention it in your foreword, and you even talked about tribalism and how we're wired for that. Can you speak a little bit to, what you've seen and, the research and even why people are drawn now to a diet as their tribe versus a religion?
Well, this is an amazing question, and there's a lot of touch points on that.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there are so many things going below the surface of a diet conversation, is that just following a certain diet, you'll never address the underlying currents which we're subjected to. Usurp this in one aspect. A couple of days ago, Kennedy actually put forth something that I've been aware of for over 30 years in the industry, is about some of these underlying currents, like the chemicals in our water and the changing of our food production, the advent of all these chemicals. Because I talk about a lot of this inside of the book, specifics on it, and I won't get into all the specifics, but this is the first time a political candidate has put forth these elements as the causes of chronic disease. And there is a pharmaceutical industrial complex in cahoots with our nutritional company, and the lobbyists and group to advent things that make us attracted to those things that keep us on the subscription list to their programs, which are suboptimal for human health. So he identified the statistics about, for example, autistic rates. He identified the statistics about hormone disruptors. He identified the statistics about the nutrient aspects because of soil degradation. No person inside of our government agencies that I'm aware of on any level has ever brought these issues to the forefront. So whether they get integrated or not, I don't know, but at least it's in the conversation now.
Yeah.
Now, this is the conversation at the highest levels of health and vitality. When you go to your medical doctor, they don't talk about fluoride in the water. They don't talk about chloride. They don't talk about hormone disruptors. They just tell you that your hormones are disrupted and that you need some, bioidentical hormones. But they don't address these underlying causes because they're not trained in it. They don't know this. And so what happens is experts are someone who knows more and more about less and less. And so they become really good at certain elements, but one of the tendencies of being an expert or being highly intelligent in one area is there's an immediate assumption that you're the smartest person in the room, and you usually are in that subject. But when you move to another subject, it doesn't transfer over.
Right.
And the trick is that it's a tendency of very smart people to make assumptions that they know a lot about something they don't. And we see this indoctrination in our medical system, in our food system, and in our political systems. And the idea is, in a democratic idea, is to challenge those ideas and values and debate them over time and try to integrate new ones. And I would go back that the advent of pharmaceuticals, the advent of commercialized farming made sense at the time. There was elements within that work. So without demonizing the industry, recognize that it's the demonization happens, or the corruption of that happens slowly and incrementally, and to becomes a force of negativity versus a force of good. And then you have both sides of the equation saying, well, the medicine industry has antibiotics and that saved millions of people, which is true. And, did vaccines at some point help people? Yeah, but is this thing that's put on as a vaccine that's not really a vaccine? It's just called that because they changed the definition and that's been just rolled out to people without anybody's choice? Yeah, that's a problem. So that's how the corruption of these industries happen. So when you go to a dietary cult, or you find a diet that works for you, and just because people are so unfit and so unhealthy and so out of shape, and this has deep psychological and emotional impact on people, because we have a little thing in our brain that measures where we are in the dominance hierarchy. And part of the dominance hierarchy is how attractive you are, how fit you are, because this leads to breeding dynamics, which is subconscious to all of our psychology. So I want to look good, and I want to be youthful, and I want to be vibrant, because that gives me a better chance to pass my genes on in time. That's it. All cells need an energy source, they need a defense mechanism, and they need to procreate to pass their genes on in time. That's the substrate of all single-cell, multi-cell organisms. And so we have a curiosity is to go out and get food, get out information. Information is a form of food. Food is a source of food. Social groups are a source of food. They support the organism. So that is our energy-seeking aspect. And we get energized by being inside of a culture, inside of a diet thing, and knowing something and having a value. And then we want to share that with other people, because as you share it with other people, you move up the hierarchy of dominance. That releases neurochemicals in your brain, which makes you feel good because there's safety moving up the value matrix inside of our little structures. And by moving up that also gives us the best chance to find a partner, to replicate with, to pass our genes on into the future. So all of our social structures, our psychological value, the fitness that we have are all tied up into these biological drives. And when you feel down because I'm fat, I'm out of shape, I don't feel good, I can't do things, you either are going to ascribe to one source, which is, hey, take this pill, you'll feel better.
Right.
Take this diet, you'll feel better. Or take this drug and check out from feeling bad. Those are the options that are presented. And unfortunately today, most people are taking the drug that checks them out so they don't have to address the uncomfortable realities of their life. And that's a real problem. And usually that's not disrupted until some sort of major crisis hits.
Right.
A death, loss of a partner, a breakup, a divorce, a financial collapse, maybe all three. And either drives you further into that self-destructive behavior or becomes the interruption device to say, okay, this isn't working. I need to evaluate all my values, thoughts, beliefs, and energies. And I need to incorporate these other things. And that's where a person is ripe to either fall into a cult trap or into a culture of excellence. And it's a very fine line between the two.
For more background on what brought us here, check out my page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped Nexium, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. And if you want to see that story in streaming form, you can watch both seasons of The Vow on HBO.
Hey parents, it's time to gear up for the school year at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. We've got all the essentials from first aid fits to backpacks, jackets, sneakers, and more. And all for an additional 25% off the outlet prices at participating stores. Send your kids back to school in style with top name brands like Nike, American Eagle, The North Face, The Children's Place, H&M, Converse, Quicksilver, and more at unbeatable outlet prices. Make this school year the best one yet at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. Visit outlets at traversemountain.com for all the sales. Outlets at Traverse Mountain. I-15 exit 284, Lehigh.
Okay, I know we've all been told that when it comes to receiving gifts, it's the thought that counts. There's that element of surprise, sure, but if I'm being honest, nothing beats getting exactly what you wanted. And with Sarah, that's extremely difficult sometimes. That's why when it comes to buying jewelry, there's no better place than BlueNile.com to get exactly what you want. Not only do I love the thousands of independently graded diamonds and fine jewelry at prices significantly below traditional retail, but their team of jewelry experts is on call to answer any questions 24/7, especially if you want to get something sports related like that tennis bracelet. Wink, wink. So say you're hypothetically struggling to figure out which hoop earrings work best for your face shape, which I do all the time. You can call or chat with Blue Nile's team to find the perfect pair, anytime. Blue Nile also offers peace of mind with every purchase with 30-day returns and a diamond price match guarantee. They make online jewelry shopping easy, which shouldn't be a surprise. They've been doing since 1999. So what are you waiting for? Go to BlueNile.com to find the perfect piece today. That's BlueNile.com, BlueNile.com. Your significant other will thank you. I know Sarah will. Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one. It's interesting. You're talking about, kind of a controversial subject, more so 4 or 5 years ago. And the tendency is to go, oh, they hear what you're saying, they go anti-vax. He thinks the pharmaceutical company's bad. And then the other side is, oh, I totally agree with this guy. I hate vaccines and all pharmaceuticals are bad. And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Correct.
Right? And so how do you nurture a culture in any of these, particularly in the food, because people are married to certain beliefs in their foods? How do you integrate the culture to where we can criticize both and we can come to a civil discourse with both, because people are really dug in on their beliefs on these things?
What's us versus them?
Yeah, well, I've been in the spectrum. You've seen me I've gone from here to like, what the hell? And then I've had a process of like, hey, how do I get here? You know what I mean? So
I don't think we can. I think the reality is, if we would look throughout all history, there's been a long battle of ideas, and we have what I call the Protoplasmic Hangover. And the Protoplasmic Hangover is, I'm of the Jungian philosophy that consciousness exists as singularity, just like the flame under your gas burner is one flame, but it comes out the little holes and you see all these other aspects. Because if I die, is there still consciousness? And before I was born, was there still consciousness? Yeah. Whatever that is, there's some aspect of intelligence or consciousness or whatever. And that's distributed between animals, plants, all biological organisms. Maybe now they're talking about artificial intelligence as a topic, right? And it's kind of interesting, like anything artificial is usually not that good for you, but artificial intelligence is supposed to be. So anyways, that's a whole funny topic, but
yeah.
Separate episode.
So we get into this consciousness disbursement, and just like I saw, there's truth within all diets that are expressed with these little flames of the different dietary philosophies. About 80% of what people say is actually works. So I apply the Pareto's distribution. 80% of what that person is saying is probably truth. So rather than seek the divisionary aspects at first, let me find common ground with that person first, which is 80%. So if somebody is for vaccines or not for vaccines, what's underneath that? What's underneath that is that they believe that their choice is good for them and good for society. So we actually agree on the fundamental points, is that we want good for other people.
Right.
That's the common element.
Right.
The question is, hey, you believe that this is good, and I believe this is good, but what's our motivation? Our motivation is to create a healthier, more vital, and healthy society. This is where the common elements are. It's the same common elements. So I think that so much of social media and so much of news headliney stuff, gotcha stuff, is about division, because division activates our threat detection mechanisms.
Right.
Okay? Going back to the defense mode. If there's a car crash, if there's violence, if there's bad guys coming over the horizon, we have this integrated into our genetics. That's a threat.
Right.
We need to defend up around our little culture and fight that, because that means we survive. And so that survival bias overrides our prefrontal cortex, and we're just simply a bunch of monkeys fighting over bananas. You're fighting over territory, fighting over the territory of I know what's going on, which is an ego position. Mm-hmm. I'm smarter than you. I know what's better. I've got a bunch of people who are bolstering my idea, and therefore you're an idiot, right? And what it is I think the whole social media stuff has also accelerated egotism and narcissism, which will set the tones for what we started at first of psychopathy, sociopathy, and eventually in its highest forms, megalomania.
Right.
And so we all are subjected to that, and we're seeing this play out in front of us. And so I saw this in the diet industry. I came up with a book to help figure this all out. I had enough exposing in the spiritual community, the dietary community, the business community, the health community, and I got exposed to so many different things in my life I was like, oh, there's common elements of discord in all of these, and therefore I have to go below just the diet or just this to actually address the fundamental aspects, and that is how we determine the world through our sensory inputs and our need to be safe, our need to be able to move up the dominance hierarchy so that I can replicate my genes through time. That's it. And if you understand that biology, then you have a defense network against my own egoistic aspects, because, what do I know? So I always say that, what do I know? I don't know. This is what I've learned. This is what works for me. I don't know anything.
Right.
Which brings us back to the humility you talked about at the beginning. So given that biology and our need to be safe and all of these things, it makes sense that we're in such a divisive time where we're monkeys fighting over bananas.
And there's positive too. You work it out.
You can. And I like the idea of common ground. And I'm always thinking about what does our audience need in terms of, and you may not know this, but in addition to people who are just fascinated by cults, there's a lot of cult survivors that listen to this. And I think many of them, if they've been burned or conned and realize they were following a false guru, are very hesitant to trust anybody else. Or they are cult hoppers and they're trying to fill what we call the cult-shaped hole in their heart, and they join something else because they haven't healed yet. But at least for me, I've been very hesitant to join a group or follow anyone. But one of the things I got from your book is that it is important, if you want to take your health seriously, that you have some kind of accountability, or often a coach or somebody who can guide you. How do you think these people can look for a mentor or a guide in the space, especially given all the charlatans that exist in health and wellness?
What is the level of humility that person possesses? So if they're coming out with the proclamations, the 10 commandments, thou shalt this and thou shalt not that, you're heading into dark waters, in my opinion. If the person says, hey, here's what I've experienced and learned, and I'm advocating it, but there's an out. If this works for you, take it. If it doesn't, abandon it. I'm merely offering a set of suggestions of what worked for me, but I want you to trust yourself enough that if something is creating an uncomfortable feeling in yourself, if something is detrimental to your goal, in this case, fitness or health or living your best life. If you're seeing the data that shows that, eating fats is throwing off my cholesterol despite what this guru tells me, then stop eating those fats and see what happens. Like, try something else. So there needs to be a combination of curiosity and humility, but also that checkpoint. And this is where it's good to have friends with completely opposing opinions. So cultivate friends. So if you're a Republican, you need to have a friend who is a hardcore Democrat. And if you're a hardcore Democrat, you need a friend that's a hardcore Republican. If you're a hardcore raw foodist, you need a friend that is a hardcore carnivore person. And I had that with Matt. And the reason we were able to make this book is because Matt and I knew him. We both had the same values. We wanted to help people. We fell in love with transferring people's lives physically as trainers and nutritionists. We built a company around that. We decided that value of creating value in the world was more important than our differences. And that led us to a oftentimes combative relationship internally and a unification externally. And the world's a better place for it, and we're a better place for it. It wouldn't have happened if I didn't have Matt in my life, and it probably wouldn't happen to him if he didn't have me. So what I would suggest for everyone to protect themselves is to have the person who is continually questioning your values, your cult dynamics, your whatever, as a friend who's close to you that can checkpoint Charlie, because every now and then they may have a point.
That is such good advice. I wish I had more people questioning me when we were next to him and with better questions, because they didn't know what to ask.
They were, a lot of them. We
weren't open to that.
Yeah.
But now I would be. I know we have like 6 minutes left.
Oh, that's right.
A couple quick things. You've already mentioned ego, but I've heard you say in other interviews and in your book that people have a cult relationship with their diet. So never mind even the guru, they have this dynamic with their diet. Can you elaborate on that, what you mean by it?
Yeah, so I remember this happening to me as I moved up the level of popularity and became known in a lot of nutritional circles. And I got to know the people in the green room, as I like to say, before you go out on stage. And, you kind of have this little subculture up there. It's like, you're the big
speakers.
stars. And then everybody's kind of playing to who's the biggest star and who's like the lowest star. And you're there's a whole social hierarchy within that.
Oh my God, and so lame.
And what happened is I would see some of these I was hyper disciplined, and I would see or hear rumors of people who are the advocate of this dietary values that weren't following all of the dietary tenets that they advocated. So I saw these raw foodist guys that were eating meat on the side. I saw these keto people who were slamming carbohydrates and sugar at I'd run into them at the donut shop at 6 a.m. and they were sneaking there. And I remember even myself when I went off my raw food diet, because I was raw food for 2 years. And I remember the feeling I had when I ate a cooked veggie burger.
Sacrilege.
First off, I was like, oh my God, I loved burgers in the past. I didn't have one for years. A veggie burger came out. And I really wanted a veggie burger, but it wasn't raw. But so we got out of the meat, but then it was like it's a plant-based burger, and I had this veggie burger. It was awesome. Tasted great. I loved it.
I'm like salivating.
Had some French fries with it too. Wasn't supposed to have those. It was great. Now, I did feel a little bit fatigue afterwards, but I came back and I was like, doggone it, that burger and fries was good. And then I felt the guilt come up inside of me. Wade, you've violated the raw food tenets. You're a bad person. You're a fraud. You are deceiving the raw foodists around the world. You need to flagellate yourself. And I watched this part come up inside of me that I was breaking this code, this ethics, and that's what keeps people inside those institutions. And I was in it, and I had to fight it. And those books I talked about really helped me with that. I had to do a lot of prayer and meditation to kind of ask for guidance. And then I had to give my license. And to be frank, that was about a 2-year process to fully turn down the voice in my head that was giving me the guilt dynamics that I wasn't this or I wasn't that or whatever. And so my message to everybody that finds themselves out there is, it's normal for you to have that internal conflict. That internal conflict has positive aspects and negative aspects. And this is why you want to not only have someone who is on the opposite side of your belief system, but you also want a coach and a specialist to be able to be your advocate and to walk you through those dynamics that you don't want to discuss in public. So someone that has your trust, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, whatever that happens to be, someone with a professional designation that can walk you through that without judgment. And so that you can look at your own self-judgment objectively and walk through the natural emotional and psychological aspects that activates the traumas, the whatever that, led you to believe that. And if you can do that and have that checkpoint, Charlie, I think you'll protect yourself, and you can take the benefits of different cultures and positive aspects of different cults, because everything is a cult at some level, and as you guys are probably discovering, and take the positive stuff, but you don't get too caught in the weeds that you end up in a bad place.
And that's such good advice, and what a positive note to end on. And I think that that's something our listeners can certainly take away, and we certainly have from you. And I
for sure, your book's great.
Yeah,
your
book is really phenomenal, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's wanting to be healthy from the inside out, as you said. And
we could talk for hours, man.
But we know you're very popular. You're very popular, and you've got another call right after this. Any final things you need to say to us before we let you go to your next thing?
Yeah. It was interesting to watch the whole process that you guys went through and to be part of it and to be there in the kind of the dark night of the soul that you guys were enduring. And your commitment to your ethical values that brought you both into that led you accelerated it, and that let you get out of that. And, I remember those things, and you had to trust that you were on the right path when even the closest people, your best allies and friends, were going against you. And somehow you guys navigated it through that. And so you're living examples that's happened. And I remember saying, at some point in time, this could be a value that you can't imagine. Just stick with it. And now here you are in your show, and you've had the series and everything. And so it's like you're doing good in the world from what you endured. And that means that you were always on the right path from the beginning. And so congratulations on staying the course against adversity.
Thank you. And Sarah and I were talking this morning, and I was like, I remember talking to Wade. I was like, I think we're meant to work together on something. This is 5 years ago. And you were like, yeah, here it is. So.
I didn't think I was going to cry in this episode, but you did it. You did it, Wade. So thank you for saying that and for all your positivity. You have such your megawatt smile, and your integrity and your friendship is a big bright light in this world. So
when's the due date?
Somewhere around 8 weeks, whatever that means. Babies show up on their own time.
This is going to be the most well-nourished baby and mother combo. This baby's going to come out like a superhero.
Hopefully we can see you soon.
So I said he's going to come out in a ninja roll because she's a world champion in jiu-jitsu. I said the kid's coming out with the ninja roll is going to cut the cord himself.
So, I wouldn't doubt it.
Just like Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris did that.
Exactly. This kid's going to be Chuck Norris. I hope so. Well, as long as it's healthy and happy, and I get to go that experience that you guys have done. You've been an inspiration on that. So I'm excited to embrace that part. And I'll be calling on you a few times like, hey, guys.
You bet. Remember,
I need some help here. I don't know what I'm doing.
Remember what I said. You remember this. You're
getting
to know the kid.
The cult,
yes, that is one of the big things you told me that I believe.
Yeah, but also like the cult of do you co-sleep? Do you put it in the crib? There's so many, there's a whole new world of division out there as a parent. So that you come back and tell us about that in a year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just accept that you're going to make mistakes. Hopefully they're not lethal.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time, Wade. You are such a gem. Please keep in touch and come visit.
I will.
Mwah. You like what you hear? Please do give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know what to do. Thank you, everybody. We hope that you enjoyed that. We certainly did. In fact, we stopped recording after an hour, and then we talked for another half an hour. I wish we'd kept the record button on because...
It's always like that with Wade, though. Just, what do you think on this? What do you think on this?
So back in the old days when we lived in Vancouver, we used to have these great parties, and I would be the hostess and get everyone their drink and bring them in, and I'd be like, at the end of the party, where's Nippy? And he'd be sitting on the patio, practically like in a, what's it called, like a smoking jacket and a cigar. Not really, but this is my image of him. And him and Wade would always be sitting there waxing about politics and health and wellness and whatever's going on in the world. So this is reminding me a little bit of that. But how did you feel hearing about what he said in terms of how he supported us?
It wasn't a surprise. He's always been that kind of guy.
Yeah. He never judged us when we got out, and he was just like full of positivity and almost like a casual therapist on the side as we were going through the shittiest of the shit show.
Well, he knew us too. So he knew like we were coming from the right place. And, all those people that knew us are happy to see us doing what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's certainly one of them. So
other interesting points I thought were, I loved his Arnold impression. You have a good one too, which I don't think we heard.
All right. So I'm going to do a couple imitations from movies, and if you guys know what they are, let us know. I want Hawkins Bati found. Sweet pot on double back, 50 meters. Let's go.
Don't know it.
We move 5 meters spread, no sound. 12 gauge autoloader, the phase plasma rifle in the 40-watt range. Uzi 9mm. And if you don't have it, don't hit it.
So that you've got to explain what it is. He's like,
no, they have to guess.
Oh, they've got to guess.
Well, the don't have it, don't hit it. It's going to be an obscure one because it's from Pumping Iron and some of the outtakes, and they're all sitting around flexing in the mirror. And Arnold goes, "Well, you have to hit the side chest like this." And they're all looking at him. He looks at the guy and goes, "And if you don't have it, don't hit it." It's so good. Anyway,
both of our kids still say this. Other interesting thoughts. Cult inside of culture. Obviously it's sort of a no-brainer, but we've never really talked about it on the show. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to really get into Wade, how we define cult and how, yes, lots of things can be culty and say that's a cult, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to steer away from that and say, like, what bad thing is happening in the group that's specifically like toxic or bad for you versus, if you throw the word cult around too much, it loses its punch. Which also reminds me, he brought up a certain group, the yoga, like a Buddhist teacher that we have not researched. So we're not advocating for this guru, and we don't know if there's been allegations. We're glad that Wade never had a bad experience, or his experience was good. But as we know, that isn't always the case. So,
well, what I see Wade really good at is finding people who have knowledge, going and taking the knowledge and using it for his own life, which is originally what all this stuff is for in the first place. You don't want to make it your life. And I think Wade is able to do that because he has a pretty singular focus. And so he goes, how do these tools fit in with my focus? Which is, I think, made him less susceptible to joining a group.
And he taught, and like the idea of a buffet of different belief systems. Just put what you want on the plate.
Is it a coincidence that he's using food metaphors?
I don't know. A vegan and a carnivore walk into the bar.
Get drunk together.
Okay, everybody, let us know what you thought of this episode. Be careful when you're out there on the Instagram choosing things, and I hope that this episode helps you be a little bit more discerning. You know what I mean?
I'll be back.
Let's end it right there. Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out a-little-bit-culty.com/culty resources, and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain/bodyguard, Jess Temple Tardy. And our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
Hey moms, looking for some lighthearted guidance on this crazy journey we call parenting?
Join me, Sabrina Kohlberg,
and me, Andy Mitchell, for Pop Culture Moms,
where each week we talk about what we're watching
and examine our favorite pop culture moms up close to try to pick up some parenting hacks along the way.
Come laugh, learn, and grow with us as we look for the best tips
and maybe a few what not to do's from our favorite fictional moms.
From Good Morning America and ABC Audio.
Pop Culture Moms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.